So we're executing our first query from our React client, and note that if you refresh the page, you can see very quickly our loading state. We can see our loading text right before we have all of our data displayed in the page. Now before we start work on our home page where we display all of the track information, we need to set up our authentication. We need to authenticate users visiting our app. So we'll begin work in our auth subfolder of components. The way this is generally going to work within our application is when a user visits our site for the first time, they'll be shown the register page. They'll need to create a user and then they can log in. Once they're logged in and we give them a valid JSON web token, we verify it and then send them to the home page. So what does this mean? Well, within our main index.js file, we're either going to display the root component that we're currently displaying to show users the app, or if they're unauthenticated, we're going to show them the auth component. And the auth component is going to contain either the register form at one time or the login form. So first let's bring in the auth component to our index.js file. And the route for that is going to be when we import auth from /components/auth. So what we're providing is this index.js file. So with this import, we're just bringing in the index.js file within the auth folder. And if we replace root with auth here between the provider tags, when we save, we should see in our browser our auth component. As you can see, it contains the text auth. At any time, the auth component is going to be displaying either the register form or the login form. So we need to import both of those files into index.js within auth. So we can import login from ./login, since it's within the same folder auth, and import register from ./register. We'll add some logic soon enough to either display one component or the other, but for now we're just going to return the register component within index.js. So when we save, we should see the text register. So let's begin by adding our register form. We'll go to the register component and we'll uncomment all of these styles that I've commented out, all of these components, and we'll remove our starting markup, and we'll get started creating our form by adding a div with the class name classes.root. Within it will be a paper component, the class name classes.paper. Up at the top of the form we'll have an icon, which will be within an avatar component, which will have the class name classes.avatar. Then that icon will be a gavel icon. So we'll have a gavel component. And then underneath avatar, we'll have within a typography component the text register. And this typography component will have the variant headline to make it a bit larger. And then after this header area, we'll have our form for users to actually sign in. Now let's think ahead a little bit. When a user fills out this form and they submit it, we want to execute a certain operation. In particular, we want to create a new user. And we know that it corresponds with a given mutation that we have called create user. So to execute this, we need to bring in another component from React Apollo, the mutation component. It's just the mutation version of the query component that we brought into our root component previously. And while we're at it, since we know we need to write this mutation out, we'll import GQL from Apollo Boost. So underneath typography, let's create our mutation tags, which will surround our form. And we know that we're going to have a render prop here, render props function here, so Let's add that first. And from this function, we still need to return our JSX. So our form is going to be within this return area. So within the return, we'll add a set of form tags, and it'll have the class name classes.form. Then within it, we'll have a form control component with margin set to normal. It'll be required. The input within this particular form control component will be required, and it will take up the full width of the form. So we'll use the full width keyword. Then for the input label, it's going to be its own component where the HTML4 is going to be set to username, and it'll have the text username. And then the input itself will be an input component consisting of just a single tag where the ID will be username, and all of this will be our first input for new users to provide their username. Now let's copy this form control and paste it in a couple of times underneath. We'll create another form control with the HTML4 on its input label set to email, with the text of the label being email, where the input ID will be email and the type of input will be set to email. Then finally we'll have a password input where the HTML4 will be password, the text within it will be password, the ID of the input will be password, and the type will be password. Then underneath the form control, we're going to have a couple of buttons. The first button will have the text register. It's going to have the type submit. It'll be full width. The variant will be contained. The color will be the secondary color in our theme palette. Then for our second button, it's going to direct users to the login form if they've already registered before. So the button will have the text previous user question mark log in here, where it'll have the color primary. Variant will be outlined, and it'll be full width. So let's save register and check it out in the browser. And it looks like we're getting an error because we didn't pass anything to our GraphQL mutation component just yet. Let's comment this out for now. Comment out the opening and closing tags and just see how this looks. And let me add one more class to our first button. Class name for the register button will be classes.submit. So now we have our register form, and in the next video we'll take a look at how to make this functional to actually create a user when a new user fills this out.